Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to fix some issues that happened in the previous video when we were implementing cat functionality, whereby session key was not being created correctly. And also in this video, we are going to implement the counter of the items in the cart, so we are going to create that context processor. So before, let me replicate the error that we are getting. So let me run the server. So python manage.py run server. Let me run my tailwind css. So npx tailwind css, and then let us visit a local host so that we can see where the error that I'm about to fix. So this issue is related to an authenticated user. Remember, in our previous video, part 1 of cat functionality, we had this logic that even those who are not authenticated, they should be able to add products to the cart, and then the cart will be created from the session ID. And if they are authenticated, then the user is grabbed. Okay, so let's try it. So you can see I'm not signed in, so let me try to add this cart. Okay, it is adding correctly, but if we go back to our backend, you will notice the session ID is not being registered. So say admin. So if we go here under carts, you will notice that you see we are getting this error. So this is the error that I want us to fix immediately. So to fix this issue, you can see we are returning self.cartid, but we have this function that is supposed to grab the session key. So we are going to alter this function a little bit so that it can get or create the cart ID from the session. So let us delete everything here, and then let's say if not request.session key. So if the session key does not exist, we need to create it. So if not request.session key, so we need to create that session key. So we say request.session.create, and then else let's have cat ID equals to request.session key, and then now we return the cat ID. This function will help us get or create a cat ID from the session. So here we are checking if the session already exists. If it does not exist, we create that session key, and then we return cat ID. And then now let's alter our add cat function. So here we need to alter this. We need to determine the cart ownership. So we'll say if request.user is authenticated, user.request.user. So we assign the logged in user, and the cart will be none. You can see here we have the user and the cart. So if the user is authenticated, we use that user. If the user is not authenticated, we want to use the cart ID, which is the cart. We want to use this cart, and then else, that means that the user is not authenticated. So cart ID equals to cart ID request, and the user is none. And now here let's delete this underscore and say use created. Yes, created equals to cart.objects.get or create cart ID equals to cart ID. And then let us go to our models. Let's check the models. Let's see, we want this cart ID to be unique, so let's add unique equals to true. So we need to have that, and as well we need to have, and then let us have a default for the quantity. So let's say quantity default is 0. Okay, and then we need to have, that is it for now. So let us make migration since we have altered our models. So let us make migration. So let me clear the terminal and then say python manage.py make migrations, and then let us migrate. So python manage.py migrate. So from there, let me try to refresh this. Let me go back. Let's try to add new products. In our models, let's convert this to be a string. So let me cut this and say string, convert it to be a string, self.cut ID, and then let us try to open this. So you can see we have none. That is before we made those changes. So let me delete this, and now let's try to add a new product. Okay, so I have to log out so that I add products as an authenticated user. So let's try to add this product to the cart. Add to cart, it has been added. So let's go back to our admin to check if the session key has been registered as our cart. So if we go to carts, you will be able to see our session key has been grabbed to replace the cart. And if we go here, you will be able to see this was added, and you will be able to see the cart is here. So if we add the product as logged in user, this will be empty and the user will be selected. There is an issue as well as is active. Let's say this one will delete null equals to true and say default equals to default. Let us have a default of true. That is it. We have fixed that issue of sessions, registering these sessions. So now let's move on to counter. So we want, when the user adds a product here, there is a counter that counts how many products that have been added here. So we are going to use a context processor to achieve that functionality of counting how many products have been added to the cart. So let's do that. So to create a context processor, let's go to carts. And inside our carts app, let's create another file called contextprocessors.py. So we have created this contextprocessors.py. Now let us import cart and cart items. So from .models, import cart. We also want to have cart items. So basically this context processor will help us count how many products that have been added to the cart. And we also need to import the cart ID so that we can track that cart ID, how many products are associated to that cart ID, okay, for non-authenticated users. So we'll say from views import cart ID. Okay, now let's call that function counter. So let's say it takes request. Let's initialize item count. So the default item count is 0. So let's say item count equals to 0. And then let's say if admin in request path, we need to return an empty dictionary. So that is to ensure that for the admins, we return empty string. Else, if the user is not admin, we need now to count the products that has been added to the cart. So we are going to use try except block. So let me pass, and then let me except cart does not exist. If the cart does not exist, so cart dot does not exist. And then if the cart does not exist, item count will remain to be 0, and then count will be 0, and then context processors returns a dictionary. So we'll say return a dictionary. So we'll say dict as dictionary, and then we say item count equals to item count. So now let us now count the items associated to that cart. Okay, so let me remove this pass and say cart equals to, we are getting all objects in cart model. So cart dot objects dot filter, we are going to filter those objects. So we are going to filter those objects based on cart ID. So we say cart ID, cart ID equals to, we are using that function cart ID, and then it takes in the request. Okay, and then we are getting this, we are filtering this based on the session key. So that is why we are invoking this function cart ID request to be our cart ID. Let's now count the items for authenticated users. So we say if request dot user dot is authenticated, then we say cart items equals to, say cart item dot objects dot all, we get all objects, and then we filter those objects. So we need to filter those objects based on the logged in user. Okay, so we say user equals to request dot user. Here we are filtering all the objects in cart item based on the logged in user. That is why we are passing in to the filter function user equals to request dot user. That means the logged in user will get all the cart items. Okay, and then else, that means the user is not authenticated. Else we want to have cat items equals to cat item dot objects dot all, and then we need to filter this as well. So filter, and we say cat. Remember, now we are using this cat ID function for non-authenticated user, so we are going to filter based on this. We will say cat equals to, and then we slice that cat. So here we are getting all the cat items from the cat. Okay, we are getting cat items from the cat. And now we need to loop through cat item in cat items and then count those items. So we'll say for cat item in cat items, so item count. So we say item count. Now we need to increment those counts. Okay, those items. So we say cat item dot quantity. Okay, so this is the function that will help us count that. And then once we create this context processor, we need to add these context processors to our context processors in our settings. Okay, so let's go to our settings, base.py. Under base.py, scroll down until you reach here, say context processors. So here in context processors, we need to add that context processor. We'll say cats dot context processors dot the name of the context processor is counter. Okay, so dot counter, sada comma, and then now let's go to our navbar. Here you can see here is where we want to count the products. Okay, so let's go to our count navbar. So it includes navbar is here, and let us scroll down to where we are counting. So you can see here, this is our cat, and then we have these 10. So we want to use this dynamic generated. Okay, so we say double call braces, and then we pass in item count variable. Remember, we are using that item count variable here, and then we are incrementing that item count here. So if we go back to our browser and refresh this, be able to see it is 0. Let's try to add a product and see. Okay, the product has been added, but it has not reflected yet. So that means there is an issue about that for logged in user. So let us log out. All takes exactly 1. There is an issue in context processors line 17. So let's check that out. Okay, yes, at line 17 we have this comma. It should not be comma, it should be a full stop period. So it will be cat item dot object dot all. Then let's try to refresh this. Now we have that. Let's add a product, say add to cart. You see now it is changing the count. Let's add another product. You see it is not changing because we have only that product. Is only that product, we have 2 of them. When we will do a part 3 part where we will be creating cart template, we will be able to see that. So let me add this, which is a different product. You see we have 2 products. So let's try it for the logged in user. Let's log in with Google. So yes, so for the logged in user, let's check why is that issue. So get the cat using cat ID present in the session. Ensure that you have the cat.object.filter cat ID request, and if request.user is authenticated, we want to get cat items cat item.object.all.filter user equals request.user. Else get all the cat items using the cat, and then we loop through the cat items, and then we increment the item count, except if the cat does not exist, item count remains to be 0. Okay, return a dictionary of item count equals to item count. So this is our dictionary. Let's now refresh this. Remember, we are logged in, so if I refresh, you will be able to see we have 1 product. So let's try to add another product and see if it will increment in our cart. So let me add. You can see we have added. Let me add a different one. So add. You see it has been added. Let me log out. Try to add this. It has been added. So thank you for watching. That is it for this video. Consider subscribing if you find this video helpful. Give it a thumbs up and also leave a comment if you have any issues. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.